Good morning, everyone. I want to welcome everyone, and especially people who just join us. In advance, I want to tell you that I really wish and hope and pray that we will be able to be together in person, and I miss each and every one of you. And also, I'm talking here to three different cameras, so if you don't see my eyes, always connected to either your camera or your Zoom or other media channels. It's because I'm traveling with my eyes through three different cameras, and I'm sorry for that. Hopefully soon we'll be able to be together and study together the same place as we did for a long time. The painful subject I would like to discuss with you this morning, it's a derivative from both this week's parsha and other parashiyot in Dvarim, in Deuteronomy, and the subject is hard money lender and Judaism. So today we're going to discuss money, and not just in a sense of understanding mindset of Torah and Judaism when it's come to money, but also to dig in the whole difference between commercial loan, personal loan, and more. And I would like to start with a pasuk, a phrase, a sentence that those who have Chumashim, is on page 743, verse 35, or other Chumashim is Book of Vayikra, chapter 25, verse 35. And this is a commandment that repeats itself several times in our Torah. If you, in a sense, brother, can be anyone who's connected to you, becomes impoverished, and his hands falter in your proximity, you shall hold on to him. And then the Torah said, Al tikach me'ito neshech, do not take from him interest and any form of increase, and v'yareta, and you should fear your Lord your God. It repeats itself several times, both in this parasha and other parashiyot in Chumash Dvarim. True story that happened just to someone I know in Israel during the pandemic coronavirus. The fellow just retired from many years of IDF service, and as a family person he opened a small business, and it was just establishment of the first year of his business, and all of a sudden the pandemic, the coronavirus took place, and by force of circumstance that fellow was have no other choice but to go to which we call either gray or black market or hard money lender, or whatever you use that term, meaning when he tried to go to a regular conservative bank and ask for a regular commercial loan, because the history of his business was so short, and because his proven of success was relatively small, they did not approve the in-between loan, since his business was forced to be closed. And as a result, just in order to survive, meaning to pay a basic payment for not just outside people, but even to support his own wife and little children, he took that crazy loan, which is the hard money lender. As those of you familiar, is one of the terrible things that happen in society. People lending money to other people for crazy interest, like 14%, 18% interest, if it's not going in a regular conservative way, and sometimes they put a lien against something that it's very essential to a person's life. I'm using that as a springboard because this is something that unfortunately happens a lot. People who have families, they need to marry their children, they need to send children to school, they need to have a very basic foundation for their either education or food, and they really cannot make it. They can be for many, many reasons. Some of them are really essential reason, in a sense, in our language, not that they're full. can be issue of sudden disability, can be other issues. And as a result, they knocked at your door and they said to you, please help me, I'm in a situation that I must have some loan, just a bridge loan or some loan. Can be your sister, can be your brother, can be your brother-in-law, can be your close friend, and more. Here, all of a sudden, our Torah interferes with a strong commandment that repeats 3 times, some said even 6 times in our Torah, and tells us that it is absolutely prohibited to charge an interest. And here is a very serious question we need to discuss. Why? Meaning, let's trace the situation. You have in your side a CD, a other source of saving or other money that you can put, if we're not talking about bonds or stocks or other source of generous income, even a very basic conservative one, which is just go to a regular bank and get several percent, let's say 2% or whatever they are giving at this time. Now your sister, your brother, your nephew, your cousin come and said, I need a loan for 100K. The Torah comes in and said, you are prohibited to give him the loan with the interest. And vice versa. The Torah also tells you that as a borrower, you are prohibited, you are in a strong violation of Torah law that repeats again and again and again, to pay an interest for a loan you took from your, for example, immediate family or relatives. Now, it asks a simple question. So how come Judaism allows you to go to a regular bank and take a mortgage? How come there are money lending institutions that they are formal, legal, and approval, which called in Hebrew heter iska, meaning they're allowed to do business in transactions of giving loan and getting the interest for those businesses. What exactly, in a broader question, is what exactly our Torah instruction and laws and regulations when it's come to a serious issue of Karl Marx, the difference between socialism, capitalism, dictatorship, or communism. What exactly the difference between all these 4 attitudes that we are, I'm sure that especially this crowd, the very intelligent crowd, are very familiar. Not only our Torah prohibited, if you look, for example, at the prophet Ezekiel, he compared charging an interest from your, for example, immediate family, or borrowing from your best friend with interest, the same as act of murder. That's the language of prophet Ezekiel. And the question again, if I agree upon as a borrower to pay an interest, and my agreement is because I said if I need to use a other institution, if I need to go to other places, it charged me double or triple for that loan. So why I cannot go to my sister-in-law and borrow from her money for the same amount that she gets for her CD? If she had or if I have a money in let's say in a bond or in a CDs that gain, let's say 3%, and instead of getting the 3% from Israel bonds or from the conservative bank, I'm getting it from my best friend. Why the Torah said it's a problem? Both parties agree upon, both parties knows what's involved, especially when it's come to the lender. If you take the entire 613 mitzvot, entire 613, can someone here, Betty, can you turn off the, unmute your, another person here, just please? Okay, so why? What's the reason that in entire Torah, the entire 613 commandment, the only business that is prohibited to us, the Jewish people, is interest, charging interest from our fellow? Why this one, all of a sudden, God has such a strong language? Look at the language of the text. they said, V'yareta, you should have a fear, you Lord, you God. I am you Lord, you God, who took you out of Egypt. Can you mute can you mute, I think it's Fran. Can you mute your computer? It's just hard for me to speak. Thank you. Okay, so they said that you should fear you Lord your God. I'm your Lord your God who took you out of Egypt. I'm your Lord your God who protect you and took you out of all your crises. You should not dare to either borrow or lend money to anybody with interest. Let's zoom in the text again and analyze the words. V'chiyamuch achicha. You see a situation that you have someone you know, can be a blood relative, can be a good friend, can be someone that you, in a way, love or like or trust, someone you know well, your neighbor. So, you have a mitzvah, umata yado imach vechezakta bo. You should help that person to carry on, to survive, to marry his or her children, to build their business or whatever it is. But then the Torah, the next verse in 36 said, Al tikach me'ito neshech. Don't you dare to take an interest from him, vetarbit, and increase. And here is Rashi. Rashi have something to say, especially with the words V'yareta me'elohecha, and you should have a fear of Lord your God. Use the term fear. And Rashi said, Lefi sheda'ato shel adam, since a average person's mind nimshechet achar haribit, a person is very attracted to gain interest for his money. V'kasher lifrosh imenu, it's very hard for the person to separate himself from her. And therefore, umoreh la'atzmo heter bishvil ma'otav. So he or she decided that it's okay to give himself like a license because this is my money, this is my fund, which were unproductive for him while the borrower's possession. So therefore the Torah warned and said, and you shall fear you Lord, you God. Meaning, you come up and you say, look, I work hard for my money. It's my money, right? I gain a certain interest from my money that those institutions are giving to me. So therefore, it's my money, and now let the money work for me. I am either retired or and I want to enjoy my money. Let me lend the money to people and let them give me an interest, and I sit leg on the beach and watch the water. Why should I, in a sense, bother? I'm helping those people. They're getting a better interest by me than getting from the bank. What they're doing in their money, I don't care. If he needs to marry his child or he needs to build his business, who cares? I'm giving him my money. Instead of getting my money in a certain interest, I'm charging him a different interest. What's the problem? Now, because Rashi explained to us that people think in their mindset that it's my money, it's my wealth, it's my labor, I earn it, therefore, you know people like that, by the way? So therefore, I'm joking, so therefore, the Torah comes in and said, you should fear your Lord your God who took you out from Egypt. Think and fear the Lord your God who gave you manna from heaven. Think twice before you say that. And the Talmud expanded that in several places, and it tells us there is a huge difference between when you take the money and use it for business, or when you're lending someone a tool or lending something to someone. Let's say you have a tool, you have a machine, and you let someone else using that machine. Obviously, that machine has some level of deterioration, and therefore, when it's returned, it's in a different term, different conditions. When it's come to money, you never get your coins, your cash, right? You lend X amount of money and you get the money, and if you're in violation, you also take the interest. So the Talmud, for example, in Tractate Bava Metzia, page 69, expand on that and tells us that there is a huge difference between lending, let's say, a truck or lending a machine versus lending money. Lending money is a total ball game, it's apple and oranges, it's two different things. And because they call it ma'od betelot, you sometimes have this yetzer hara, this evil inclination that said, the money is standing there, I don't make anything, this is a golden opportunity to have, to charge this guy 14%. He said that other hard money lenders charging him 18%. He wants whatever he wants to do with that. I put a lien against his estate, so who cares, etc. So that's the famous Spanish rabbi who was also the minister of finance, the Don Yitzhak Abarbanel. In three countries, he was the minister of finance. We quote him many times. He was both in Spain, in Portugal, and in Italy. His name is Don Yitzhak Abarbanel. He expanded to us. And he expanded that and he said, it's okay to make some money over lending institution. But, he said, when it's come to individuals, that's a total different story. And here we enter slowly and surely the mindset of our Torah. So, in a sense, if we zoom in the text, the Torah used the term mata achicha. You feel that your brother, your nephew, your relative, your close friend, about to fall apart, about to lose their pants, they're about to lose everything. Now, in order for us to get deeper the mindset of the Torah, I would like to digress for a second and talk to you a little bit about Karl Marx. And I'm sure that you're familiar with Karl Marx and Karl Marx's philosophy and theory. It's basically divided to two categories. The whole issue of conducting your money or conducting your business, the blue-collar status, and the others. Marx talked about the issue of lack of estate, lack of property of people, and therefore he used the term, and I paraphrase his words, that the hands of the destitute, the hands of the poor person is totally depend on the wealthier. Meaning, he called it later on in his writing, the law of gradual process of poverty. Meaning, the weak, the poor, the destitute become poorer and poorer, and the wealthier, on the account of the poor, become wealthier and wealthier and wealthier, right? So, trace a scenario, is a village, right? And you have a fellow that inherited from his parents a company, and everyone in his village is just working for him or her, right? Now, in a way, he or she carries a monopoly over that area, over that business. And therefore, he can play around with salaries, he can play around with paying who and what and how. And the next thing you know, you have employees that have families and they need to marry their children, for example. What they do, they don't have an asset, so they have no choice and they have to go back to the boss and borrow money from him. And what basically they give him, their labor, their hands as work. So it means slowly and surely anything and everything belong to that avaricious, very wealthy individual. And guess what? Several years passed by and somehow he decided to close up the business and move elsewhere. And now the poor become poorest. which in our simple language, meaning the poor can never ever be able to compete with the rich. All right? So when you have a situation of monopoly and no one can compete with you, you are basically in danger of taking the little that the poor still have, you're about to take it from him or her. So when it's come to the socialism, there are, in very, very, very short, there are two different attitudes. There are those who say that let the country control everything. Let us take everything from gas company, oil companies, electricity, water, airlines and everything, and therefore we can, in a way, create somehow equality. So in other words, you give the governments the right to, quote-unquote, control or help those people in need. Or another idea is that just directly take from the billionaires, take from the rich, and help those in need. So that's in very general, the idea of socialism. Can you go further with the social medicine and more? The capitalism, obviously, it's the opposite. Socialism thinks that we should spread it among everyone. And in that sense, to the extreme, you almost want to go further with avoidance of a private owned of a state. And the goal, in a way, the pure idea is to stop the rich from being so control freaks and so much control of everything and everything. Now, to ask ourselves, our Torah is capitalist or socialist? What is our Torah? So our Mishnah in Ethics of the Fathers in Pirkei Avot, chapter 5, Mishnah number 10, speaks about 4 different traits in human being. And the Mishnah said, one is mine and yours is yours. Meaning that's a simple capitalism. Then the Mishnah said, mine is yours and yours is mine. That's like a kibbutz, right? That's socialism, which means everyone has the education, equality with the social medicine. There's no competition, there's no bigotry, there's no bad feelings. The Mishnah called him Am Haaretz. Am Haaretz meaning he can be a good person. But one of the rabbis in the Mishnah, his name is Bar Tenura, he expanded on that and he said, you have to have the foundation, the wisdom, the psychological understanding of human mindset. People have a good mind, a good intent, but obviously average person do not like to work for the government, to work for others. Average person like to work for himself. And yes, you like to think that people care for the society, for others. And I'm sure you're familiar with the book, well-known Thomas More, the book that's written in 1516 is called Utopia. And in that book he described the whole idea of human psychology behind average person, why people are jealous of others, why people are selfish, and what exactly the motivation of a person to wake up in the morning and to go to work. And the whole idea boils down to the point, as the Mishnah said, that people like to work for themselves, people like to support themselves and their families. People who go by the idea of kibbutz or by social, it's not realistic the way the Mishnah tried to describe. Or sheli sheli v'shelcha sheli, what's mine is mine and what yours is also mine. That's obviously, the Mishnah said, Russia. It's a wicked person, it's dictatorship, is the total totalitarian country. And then we have the attitude of capitalism. Now, you can argue and you say that there are samples in our Torah of capitalism, such as Abraham. Abraham purchase and sell and deal with Lot, with all the monetary things. Each and every one of our early ancestors, you see that they work hard and they have their own possessions. It wasn't a group of secretaries that controlled the money, it was them that controlled it. You see in general in the Tanakh several examples of the Torah oppose the totalitarian of capitalism, which means the Torah in a way said it's okay to have your own estate that you work hard for, but God comes in and said, I want to put boundaries around the rich. I don't want to create a situation, the Almighty said, and that's the idea of you should fear you, God, that the rich become in such a situation that create more poverty in the world. Two examples are the famous story of Achab, the king Achab with Navot Israeli in the Tanakh. Over there, the king took a state that wasn't belonged to him. Another famous example is King David, when he took Bathsheba and the prophet Nathan came and said, what are you doing? Why are you taking like the sheep, the married woman to yourself while you are the king and can do everything? So in other words, overall, our Torah said that capitalism in a way can be okay if you are not a chazer. What does that mean? Shimon Peres, the former late president of Israel, said it's okay to own something, but don't be a government regulations that you enter to be a Sodom and Gomorrah, meaning that he used the term chazer, that you basically have endless limitations with your wealth capabilities. So the Torah comes in and put some boundaries around those wealthies, and it said you should have conscience, you should have the feeling of others who are not in a good shape and care for them. And the bottom line is, God said, I'm the one who provided manna from heaven, I'm the one who provided. You should know that you start up with me and I can take it back in a second if you don't follow my instruction, which is you should have conscience, you should have compassion, you should have the sensitivity over those who are misfortunate, and therefore the Torah put limitations around the wealthy, and they cannot be in unlimited control forever. In that sense, is a famous story of the Chafetz Chaim, the great rabbi in Lithuania, that he expanded his talk over this, and a wealthy person came and says, what are you rabbis talking about? I have accounts in so many banks in Luxembourg, in Sweden, in Switzerland, in Germany, in so many countries, and you tell me that God can take back whatever he gave me? What are you talking about? And the Chafetz Chaim look at him and says, for God is very simple. He doesn't need to take your money, he can take you, and that's it. But what I try to say is it's much deeper than just the attitude of God's give, God's take back. Is they understand the heart of a person. The Torah wants us to kimata achicha, when someone is misfortune, feel for him, understand him. So what we understand so far, that we divided between two entities. One is individual loan, individual who desperate for loan, versus banking institution, which means we are facing the new world, and the new world in the past several hundred of years, we have companies, corporations, banks that come to their world on a base of interest, and therefore, if you look at the text, and that's the way the Shelot V'Tshuvot Shoel V'Meshiv, it was a great rabbi about 150 years ago that came with the well-known responsa, Galicia rabbi, to differentiate between banks or lending institution that was established at the first place to help people build their businesses versus in the text of the Parsha and many other Parshiot that speaks about individual who are about to fall apart. It's two different things in a sense, almost like apple and oranges, two different entities. The rabbis, the poskim said, our Torah not speaks about lending institution, and this is the idea. And again, I do not have the whole time in the world to go over the issue of what is heter iska, what is the idea that people can go to a bank in Jewish law and borrow money in order to have a mortgage or in order to build a business. Very general is the idea that the lender becomes a partner within the business. The lender also taking some risks. The lender also involved of building someone who's not in the breach or falling apart. He is basically helping someone to build his home, his business, his life, and therefore that promissory note or that document that produced creates a lot of protection for both parties. In Jewish law, one who claimed, for example, that someone else owing, he has the burden of proof, and one of the issues that the rabbinic court can do is they impose an oath. You take, for example, a Torah, and you ask a person to place the hand on a Torah and take an oath over loan and things like that. So because we do not want to enter to that domain, therefore we build, which call a special promissory note, a special heter iska that allows those businesses that build up on a basic of building businesses. And in very short, we said that we divided between banks versus private person, or something that was built initially for the purpose of interest. Now, someone knocks your door. It's your relatives, it's your family members. Here, our Torah tells us that we have to do gmilut chesed. The Chafetz Chaim, in his book, Ahavat Chesed, chapter 15, expand to that. And he says, that's the foundation of our faith. The Rambam, in the law of charity, have 8 levels. The highest level is to build someone a capability that he or she will be able to have their own trade, and therefore they can be self-supporting. Meaning, I know a congregant of mine in New Jersey that when he was very wealthy, he helped a person, a son of a poor congregant, to go to a medical school, and for about 7-8 years he pays his tuition. So back to our subject, why the Torah don't care if it's a bank and versus they care very much if it's individual? The Torah wants to avoid a destruction of communities. I would like to use a very hard-breaking an example from the Talmud, Tractate Gittin, page 58. The Talmud over there, and obviously we will not have the whole time, describe the destruction of the Second Temple and the reason for the destruction. Obviously we know the Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, famous story of personal animosities, but the Talmud expand on that much further, and I paraphrase the words of the Talmud. The Talmud described evil of people. It was a person who was a carpenter, and that fellow asked a loan from his employee, meaning someone who works, let's use name, Abraham owns a business, and it was a business of carpentry, and you have an employee, let's call him Yerucham. And Yerucham works for him, but Yerucham have also money outside that Abraham know about it. It was several months that the business went down, and Abraham owes money to a lot of people, and as a result, he have no choice, and he asked Yerucham, his employee, to please lend him money. So Yerucham said to him, how are you assured that you'll return that money? And Abraham said, you know what, I'm willing, if I, God forbid, will not be able to pay you back, to be your servant at your home. So the employee, Yerucham, said, fine, I'll give you the money. And he said, by the end of the day, I'll go home, send your wife, and I'll give her the money. The Talmud described that the wife of Abraham did not return for 3 days, not return back to her husband. And when she came back, she was very uncooperative, and Abraham did not understand what's going on. So he went to his employee and he asked him, do you know what's happening to my wife? How come? He said to him, I don't know what happened to her. I gave her the money right away. I don't know why she did not return for 3 days. But if you want to follow my advice, I'm not telling you what to do, divorce her. So Abraham said to Yerucham, what do you mean? I don't have the money to pay for her marriage agreement, for her ketubah. So Yerucham said, all right, I lend you, let's say 100. I'll give you another loan for another 50. And Abraham, in his gullible, naive attitude, he divorced her. And guess what happened? She basically had an affair with Yerucham, of his employees. She divorced her husband and went to live with Yerucham. And the next thing happened that Abraham was a servant by the house of Yerucham. And the Talmud described it in a very painful way. And they said that his tears went to their, while he served them with cups, his tears went to their cups with crying of the misfortunate. And they said that the tears came before the Lord in heaven, the rabbi said, and God made a decision that I'm going to destroy Yerushalayim and I'm going to destroy the temple if that's the evil of people that take advantage of other people. So what we see here is that the poor person have issue of manage his or her money. The poor person doesn't have a boundaries. He's like have a very basic need of foundation of education, of health needs, and you go downhill and become weak and weak and weak and weak and vice versa. So even the little that the poor has, he is losing. So the only way to survive for the destitute, for the poor, is to get a loan from the rich. So the Torah tells us in our parashat Behar, which is the Lev in Hebrew, meaning heart, and it's also the 32 parasha of the Torah. 3 important mitzvot: the prohibition against taking interest from a private person, from a private loan. The prohibition applies to both parties, the lender, the borrower. Also a mitzvah of Shemitah, again involved with the poor and the rich. You are rich, you own the state. For 6 years you can make your money. The 7th year you have to leave it for the poor. And then Yovel, the Jubilee, which means you have the 7 times 7, the 49 years. And the Sefer HaChinuch expanded and said, Leval yivla ha'echad et chavero. The Torah wants to make sure that one big fish will not swallow the other fish, which means that that's in his mitzvah 68. He explained that, as we explained earlier from Karl Marx, the same idea, that the big fish will not swallow the small one. Why? Because the reality is that the rich take advantage of the destitute. The rich give the destitutes like a little venom, and the destitute understand that only several days later. You know, people who eat something that it's poisoning or dangerous, not always they right away realize that it's dangerous. Sometimes it takes several days for the person to realize that he ate a poisoned food. In that sense, when it's come to destitute, the poor, he or she are so desperate, they take that loan and they not realize that, yes, you have 60 or 90 days for the first payment, but then you go downhill for with the interest and the payment, and in a way the poor doesn't understand, doesn't realize what he is doing for himself. So the Torah used the word neshech. Neshech is like linshoch, meaning to bite. It's the bitten venom that the fish create, the rich create for the poor, that go down. So the Shemitah, the Torah said, wait a second, you own the property, 7th year, we comes here, Shemitah. You give away the poor, control that year, 4 seasons. So now it forces you, as a wealthy person, to build a sensitivity to the poor, which means you have a collective responsibility between the rich and the poor. Jubilee, it's even deeper. What happened? The poor person works for you. He now needs to marry his children, for example. He takes a loan. he takes a loan. How he takes a loan? You put a lien against his estate. The Torah comes in and said, wait. The land belongs to God. Every 50 years, it goes back to the original owner. So here, as the Rambam explained to us in Hilchot Milveh Veloveh, based on the Talmud and Tractate Bava Metzia, they explained to us what the Torah said in Deuteronomy 23, that the whole idea of taking advantage of those who is desperate, that's a either 3 or 6 violation of Torah law, and some said also several rabbinic law. Now, to put together all of our study today, we basically learned that there is a clear differentiation between lending money as an institution, as a commercial banking institution that built in the past several hundreds of years, that if is a promissory note that is called Heter Iska, which we don't have the time to, in that case the bank became a partner with you and they are part of the risk and more, versus when your blood relatives or best friend or someone who's in a tremendous need ask for a loan. It's a difference between regular tzedakah, you're giving $500 to someone who's needed tzedakah and you don't expect that money back, or you give a loan for someone so he can, as the Rambam said in the 8 levels, he can learn a trade or learn something and build his own business. When is that with your brethren, the Torah said, you lend the money and trust God, but do not charge him, and vice versa. Do not pay an interest if it's from your brother. Now, obviously, there is a much more to discuss, but overall, you see here that the Torah is neither a socialist nor capitalist. The Torah, in a way, support the idea of capitalism, but the Torah put a lot of boundaries in those people who are, in a way, get the blessing, manna from heaven, from God, that they're able to manage good their money. The same way, I can speak from my personal experiences knowing people, the money lending business, people who involve in those businesses, is a formula for failure when they're starting up with God. They may don't see it right away, but God cares for the poor, and one day he comes in and take it back, whatever he gives. And we always should remember that God, as we said when we bury our loved one, the first thing when we hear the news, we said, God is given, God has taken back, may his name is blessed. If we talk about life, how much so if when it's come to wealth, and that's what we said in Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, on the Nisan Tokef, we said, who will be wealthy, who will be poor, who will be up and who will be down. So if we talk about who live, who not, and what's going to happen in our world, obviously when it's come to monetary issues, we should remember, we should never say it's my money and I control my money and more. I would like to conclude also with the story of one of the well-known rabbis, that someone came to him and said, I turned 60 and the Israelis asked the person to retire at the 60s, and he said, now I let my money, I work hard to work for me. And the rabbis told him that in Judaism there is no such a thing, retirement. And he went back to another banking institution and worked for another several years, and the family said the moment that he really decided to retire, it was downhill. Because when you are working, when you're helping people, when you're doing good for the world, God in our language doesn't want the person to be lazy. They want the person to be in a constant care, sensitive, realize what's going on in the world, make people more successful, the highest tzedakah, to see people who are desperate and teach them and help them and guide them and support them and try to do everything for sure, not to lose his or her assets, but to do it in a balance, especially when it's come to a personal loan for a temporary situation of someone who's destitute. The Torah said to us that we should be very careful, should fear you, Lord your God. I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt. I am the Lord your God who provide you all the sustenance. I am the Lord your God who continue to watch over you. And as I said earlier, I miss very much all of you. I miss our study in person. I missed our disagreement and agreements over everything. That's good. And hopefully very soon we'll be able to see each other, eat the croissant and the bagels and the cream cheese and all the other goodies, and to agree to disagree and have fun. And hopefully this virus will be over very soon and we'll be able to see each other in person. God bless you all, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in this afternoon at 5:30. Thank you very, very, very much. God bless. Thank you.
ענה בכוח גדולת ימינך תתיר צרורה. ענה בכוח גדולת ימינך תתיר צרורה. קבל